welcome to the Dirt NFCA podcast. We've got a special one today. We're going to continue our Title IX series. It's crazy to think that we are rapidly approaching the 50th anniversary of Title IX. Started this several months ago, really, in trying to gain perspectives and knowledge and information. And we've got a great one today. We have Celeste Knierim with us, Gerry Pinkston with us. They're going to talk about a lot of their own experiences and also help us understand the landscape and still very much involved in the game, really evaluate where we are today too and what we need to do to continue moving the needle forward. But ladies, thank you both so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. For our coaches who maybe aren't as familiar or don't know you as well, let's go ahead. Celeste, let's start with you. Can you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you're doing these days?
Well, Celeste Knierim, born and raised in South St. Louis. Went to Roosevelt High School, played 4 sports there. And that was back in the day when we had the little blue gym outfits that were one piece and the pennies with the numbers on it. You know, we did not have uniforms. No softball either. So I played field hockey, basketball, volleyball, and track, which track was kind of a joke. I'm not a track person, but played those 4 sports and then graduated, went on to Northeast Missouri State University, which is now Truman State University. Stuck with field hockey and volleyball, and then played softball also because they had softball. So, and then from there I became a graduate assistant. After I graduated from Northeast in 72, I was a grad assist in field hockey, basketball, and softball.
All right, we're going to get into the rest of the career a little bit later too. But Gerry, in the meantime, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how you got started.
Well, I was from Chickasha, Oklahoma. I grew up with brothers, and we played everything in the backyard because we had boys in the neighborhood. There weren't any girls, so I was the only girl. I just went out and played everything they did: football, basketball, baseball, wherever it was, and didn't know any different until one day my mother came out and told me to quit playing football. That young ladies weren't supposed to play football. But anyway, that was after my brother tackled me real hard, and she saw him do it. But anyway, when I got to junior high and high school, they only had tennis for girls and 6 or 7 sports that my brothers could have played. But I went out for tennis because in grade school, a high school principal kind of did a tennis clinic that got me started. And my older brother played tennis, so I kind of followed in his footsteps. But I played tennis junior high and high school all 6 years. And in the summer, some ladies on a women's team asked a couple of us to play softball. So that's how I got my start in softball. So until college, I just played softball and tennis. Got to college at Oklahoma State University and thought I died and gone to women's sports heaven because there were 10 sports for women. And we were encouraged to play anything we wanted to play. It was all walk-ons, as you would call it nowadays, with no scholarships, of course, all pre-Title IX. But we were physical education majors. So I just went crazy and went out for 7 sports. Didn't play all of them all 4 years. I played 4 years field hockey, 4 years volleyball, 1 year basketball, 3 years badminton. We got to go to the first ever national badminton tournament in New Orleans. In the spring, we only had softball 2 years. I played those 2 years. And then my volleyball coach was the track coach. He handed me a discus and said, go learn how to sling this. Kind of like you, Celeste. I wasn't too big on track, but anyway, track 10, and I did 1 year of tennis. But I'd played tennis so long that I was ready to leave it behind. So I graduated college in 70, and I actually taught a year of junior high and coached the high school tennis team back in my hometown. But I found out real quickly I didn't think the junior high level was right for me. I moved to Oklahoma City, worked 3 years in physical therapy at St. Anthony's Hospital while I was getting my master's. and finished the master's in 1975 and got hired right then to teach and coach at the University of Central Oklahoma, where I spent 31 years, my whole career.
A very successful one at that, both of you. We'll get into that as well. But I'm curious, you lay out the timeline and talk about when you were graduating from college in the early 70s. And so you did not reap the benefits of any type of financial assistance or even organized sport, organized coaches. Do you remember early in your careers as Title IX started to take hold a little bit, seeing some of those things come to fruition and what your thoughts were? Celeste, do you want to go first?
Well, you're right. We had no scholarships. We had to pay for all of our travel and our meals and everything. The school didn't really pay for anything. We drove our own cars in college and had an accident, and college didn't do anything about it. We had to pay for obviously our own insurance and fixing our cars and everything else. 1972 is when I graduated, and we actually got better shirts, not a uniform by any means, but shorts again. But we actually had the numbers on and didn't have to wear the pennies. So reaping the benefits of Title IX, even when I went to Merrimack, I got lucky in going to Merrimack. When I was a grad assist for basketball, we happened to be at the same state tournament as Merrimack, and we happened to eat at the same restaurant, and the coach started talking and said, "You're a grad assist, you're from St. Louis, why don't you apply for the job?" And so I applied for the job and I got it to coach basketball. And I think maybe I was the only person to accept $500 to coach a college basketball team for a season. But I took the job, and he let me start field hockey and let me start softball. No pay after that, after I started teaching, which was another year when I got the full-time job teaching. I was not paid for field hockey, not paid for softball at all the year I was part-time. But then when I went full-time, I did get release time for softball and for basketball. And that was it. I don't know what the guys got. I don't know if it was the same or not, but that's all, I got for that. Equipment wise at Merrimack and travel wise at Merrimack, we could play in the conference and we could play schools around St. Louis, which there were numerous schools around St. Louis, but the guys in basketball got to go to Florida, and the soccer team, men's soccer team, got to go to Florida, and then baseball started going to Arizona. And that's when I was in the dean's office more than my own office, I think, because I was like, hey, if the guys get to do this, then we get to do this. And then eventually with basketball, I coached basketball for 6 years, and eventually we got to go to Florida with the men's basketball team. And then the volleyball team that I was coaching when I finished, I switched from basketball to softball. The volleyball team got to go to Florida with the men's soccer team, everybody on a bus. And then we actually got to go to Arizona because the baseball team went. But like I said, I took my lumps with the dean a bunch of times, but that, it was worth it. What's fair is fair.
How about you? We're going to get into that more because I want to know about these conversations. But how about you, Gerry, when you think about, the early years of the implementation of Title IX, what are some of the things that you remember?
Well, I would preface this, like Celeste said, we were probably looked at sometimes as troublemakers, because in the early times, I'll go back to what I said, is we didn't know that we did what we didn't have at first, because we were just so happy to get to do it. And then as time went on and we started realizing what the guys had, that's when we started going into, whether it was athletic director or deans or whoever, department chairmen, and asking for more. And so it was a constant asking, having to ask, and it was kind of tough to do. When I first started at UCO, we were on a park field, a recreational park field on the west side of town. So my kids had to drive there every day to play. And I'm gonna mostly just talk about softball. I did coach volleyball for 8 of the years in the fall, and then I was doing softball in the spring. So I did coach two sports for a while there, and then it became just softball. But our softball field was a recreational field. It did, there was a bench behind a chain link fence, and that was more or less the dugout. There was no equipment shed, no lights. I had to call the city of Edmond anytime we had a game to ask them to go out and mark the field and mow the field because I had no control over that, myself. Um, all the equipment was in the trunk of my car. I had pitching machine, gasoline generator, the drag, the bats, balls, bases, helmets. Thankfully, back in those days, we had cars with huge trunks. So I carried the equipment in the trunk of my car. The girls hand dragged the field for a while until one of them got a VW bug and said, "Coach, can we pull the drag behind the bug?" So we started dragging the field with the Volkswagen bug. Um, there's stuff like that. We only had one set of uniforms. If we did go anywhere to play, especially on a weekend and we'd play 2 or 3 games, then we'd get settled back in a hotel and have to go wash the uniforms to have it ready for the next day. Um, I was paid out of the teaching budget because I taught and coached all of the years that I was there. And so I was paid out of the teaching budget. Um, so basically, my salary raised as I was encouraged to get a doctorate degree. And so my salary raised the year I got my doctorate degree. But at some point, and I'm trying to, when we first started in 70, we were DGWS, and we're on the ground floor of starting the AIAW. So I went to conventions of AIAW, SWAIW, and OAIAW as we started all of that and started the national championships for AIAW. Eventually, our school went NAIA when all the college presidents started realizing we were going to national championships separately. The presidents across the country started combining athletic departments. We used to be separate athletic departments. They combined athletic departments, and then, of course, whatever your men's program was is what you changed to. So we went from from AIW to NAIA, eventually to NCAA Division II. So I was part of all those changes. It's kind of been fun to be a part of the evolution of women's sports because I went from some discrimination as an athlete, as I would say, growing up in Chickasha, to seeing the wonderful things that are happening, still not equal at any means, but seeing a lot of progress in that respect. Eventually, when our president combined athletic departments, he said, "We're now going to start giving scholarships for the girls." And and at that time, we still had 10 sports. So when he told us that, he said, "So we're giving you 2 full rides." We're going, "Oh, how generous." So we had to split up 2 full ride scholarships among 10 sports. And so the 10 coaches, we got together, and some coaches got $500 and some got $300, and then they took that and just divided among their players. That's how we got our first scholarships. So, I mean, it's just been things like that, all along. We eventually got to move from the park field to a field on campus. We got a few more things then. We at least got a chain link around us and a tin roof for our dugout. We still didn't have any equipment shed. I had to go ask for a shed. it took me going to the vice president of financial affairs to show him my trunk. And he said, my God, you're going to have your shed. So that's how we got a shed. That's how I got the equipment out of my car. I mean, I could go on and on with stories, but it's just been the evolution. Um, I will say that when our president combined us, the athletic director at the time didn't want to have anything to do with women's sports. So that was a struggle for me because I was always having to go in and ask for things that he didn't want to give. So until he was gone and the new athletic director came, those years were truly a struggle. Uh, Even, to the point of having to go in and keep asking, could they do something about the ant hill in center field? Just stuff like that. But anyway, so that's
Yeah, we kind of had the same thing, that we had to be at a city park for the first couple of years. We actually had to play slow pitch and fast pitch in the same 2 seasons for 2 years, my first 2 years, because there weren't enough fast pitch teams in the area. So we had to fill in for games with slow pitch, which was interesting. A lot of 1-0 games because we could play defense, but the hitting was a challenge. So, but then we had to wait for the field, and they finally put up a field that had a slope in right field, which I'll talk about later.
nice drainage though, Celeste, huh?
Oh my gosh, you had to teach the first baseman a couple of different ways of playing first base. So they were so agile that if the ball was offline, if they missed it at first base, that was an easy triple, if not a home run.
Yep.
So they had to really play good defense doing that. But talk about dragging the field. I had my Jeep out there. I had a Celica, and all the equipment, it wouldn't fit in the trunk all the time. So I bought a Jeep. We'd have to drag the field with Jeep. And then some brainy guy in grounds, which they switched groundkeepers on us. And this groundskeeper came from Florissant Valley. That's when we still had the 3 campuses, Flow Valley, Forest Park, and Merrimack. Well, Flow Valley, they didn't put a lot into softball. So they just canceled games if it rained, and we would fix the field, because we wanted to be good and we wanted to play. So I had trouble with him fixing the field, and I finally had to say, we're not Flow Valley, we're Merrimack. We play when it rains. So then we got a load of dirt, whether it was meant to be or not, full of rocks. So every time it rained, the rocks would come up, and we'd be out there, throwing the rocks off the field. It was ridiculous, but that's the way it was. That's the way it was if you wanted to compete. Finally, they got a fence all the way around so that it looked a little better, but we had the tin roof dugout too.
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't until we had a college president who had a daughter that played softball.
Oh, that's good.
And Joanna, this in one answer to your question, I fully believe that it was when the parents and grandparents of girls started saying, this isn't good enough, and so, and the college president that came here, his daughter had played softball, summer softball, and he sent a guy over to me one time and said, Gerry, we're going to have to take your space and build dorm right there, but we're going to move you to another area, and I want to build a good field. So what would you like to have? And I actually got to have input about, and we moved to where the current field is now. And we actually got a sprinkler system. We got block dugouts, we got shelves that we could put equipment on. We got moved up a lot because the president's daughter had played softball. And that's also about the time when people started filing the lawsuits across the country. And they won 100% of the lawsuits that were filed, that were Title IX lawsuits, when schools were dragging their feet, about implementing Title IX. it took lawsuits to get people to get the college presidents and the college athletic directors to step up and say, we better start doing some things or we're going to get sued. And so we started getting a few more things, but still having to go in at times and asking for more. So I still credit the parents and especially grandparents who weren't going to stand for the girls to not have the, our men's baseball team had the baseball field on campus the whole time. We started out at the park field and then got to move in and then got to the current site. And what's really kind of ironic is now at UCO we have a stadium, and it was opened like 4 or 5 years ago, and up until then, we were always trying to get more to equal what the baseball guys had. Well, when they built this stadium, it exceeded what the baseball guys had, but it only took 2 years for the baseball guys to ask for equality. And now the baseball field and the softball field, have nice artificial turf, block dugouts, everything. But it was kind of a reverse discrimination kind of thing.
Our field, we're on the corner of campus. We always have been, except for that couple of years off campus. But, we finally got a 5-foot chain link fence where we could hang our signs, 1978 NJCAA, 1979, 1980, 1981. So it was really impressive. We put up 3 flag poles for the Missouri flag, the Merrimack flag, and the United States flag. So it was starting to really look good. Came back from summer one year, can't remember what year, and they put drainage on the field, except they put a square top on it that was open to little squares inside the field, one at first and one at third. And I'm like, whoa, these kids will step on that and break an ankle, catching their spikes. Well, we'll put a mat over it. We'll just put a mat. Okay, now they're going to slide on it and break their neck. And it took a while to get those off of there. We had to play a season with those on there. And the other thing they did was they took down our beautiful fence where we hung all of our, years we went to nationals, and put up this little netting fence you see sometimes at just sports complexes. We have to use it when we have the showcases, for a 200-foot fence, with the rebarb and a cap on it. And I'm like, and they kept saying, a 200-pound man will go right through that fence. I said, these are 120-pound girls. They're going to flip right over the fence. And it took another while to get rid of that thing and put up another fence. So yeah, things were different, weren't they? You look at those stadiums now and it's like, wow, I wonder what that's like.
Well,
we had no restrooms. They had to go up to the gym until they finally got a little porta potty out there. We didn't have a shed. Everything was
when we were at the park field, had to get in their car to go to the bathroom until finally there was a little neighbor across the street who loved our team. And so he came over and he said, hey, anytime your girls want to come to our house to the bathroom, you can. But and the early days too, in fact, I didn't have assistant coaches. And it wasn't until the last 8 years where I had volunteer graduate students that were assistant coaches.
Yeah.
I wrote up all the stories for the longest time and dropped them off at the newspaper. I did the statistics by calculator after every game, and until I finally went over to our computer lab one time, told them what was going on, asked them if they could devise a program, which they did, and that made it a lot easier. I treated all the injuries. I don't remember again what year, but finally one of the SIDs came along and said, Gerry, would you want us to do your book and write the stories? And I said, here you go. And another time the head athletic trainer came by and said, Gerry, would you mind if we sent student trainers with you, out at the field? And I said, I would love that. So along the way, we got a little bit more. And like you, Celeste, when the president started putting scholarships, he also said, and we're going to start paying the coaches. And what that really meant was he just reduced our teaching load, where I was teaching 8 classes while I was coaching and getting my doctorate degree. They reduced my teaching load to 4 classes. And then he said, the reduced teaching part of your load is your pay.
Exactly.
So it wasn't like we're going to pay you extra. So anyway, it was just.
No, it was, I went through the same thing. When I was a full-time teacher, we got release time, but the release time was not very much. Instead of 8 classes, mine was 6 classes.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, whatever.
And see, the majority of coaches don't teach now at all. So I teasingly asked our coach here at UCO, who I love to pieces. He's really involved me in their team things. But I asked him, I said, what do you do? I mean, you don't write the stories. You don't have to treat the injuries. You don't have to know the field. You have a nice artificial turf. They can play within 30 minutes of the rain stopping. It's just amazing. And of course, things are different. He has so much more pressure, to win, to recruit, and the job has changed in that respect. And I am just teasing him, but I just don't think the coaches today have any idea, what all we did.
Yeah, we did everything, and raking the field,
Mm-hmm.
raking the field and throwing the turfus.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
To try to get a rain out from not
yeah.
raining you out. Yeah.
Yep. And plus academics.
Mm-hmm.
We had to watch the students' academics. Now they have academic monitoring, which I had probably my last 3 years, of coaching. But yeah, I just wrote an article for Jugs about, how coaches now, they're not physical education majors.
Right.
But they didn't take the coaching classes or the athletic injury classes or anything else. And like we had dislocated ankles, spikes, we had to be the ones to take care of the kids initially before, if we had to have an ambulance, before an ambulance got there.
Right.
And they need to be prepared. And this is especially summer coaches. I don't think they have a clue of, what to do if something happens like that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and we had to do all of that. So, yeah. The story I want to tell you about the right field, we had a slope, which, it drained well, but that slope lasted my entire career. In this one year, it was summer of 2003, they took the grass off the field, all the grass off the field. They were going to level it and put the grass back on. Got to be October, and I said, I think you better get the grass. I think you better do this because the grass isn't going to grow in the winter. And I kept warning him. Nothing. I had to play 2004. We took second at nationals again. We were at Fenton City Park. I won my 1000th game at Fenton City Park instead of my home park. That was a little irritating. So I retired. That's one reason I retired, was that because my mom had fallen, and my mom was 90 at the time, she had fallen, and I'm like, what am I doing? If they don't care enough to put my field back together after all the wins and after all the championships and all that kind of stuff, we have to play over at Fenton. Why am I here? And so I went and took care of my mom. Spent more time with my mom, which I'll never regret. I miss coaching, I miss strategy, but, and then the athletic director, who I love dearly, we're still good friends, but he said, that's the worst day of my life when you walked in and said you retired. And I said, maybe we should have put a little more pressure on the people to get that field fixed. Maybe I wouldn't have retired. So
That's mentally taxing. I mean, you've talked about this, right? That you're fighting a battle every step of the way. Whether it's the personal battle of you're doing the field, you're doing all these other things, and so there is no rest and recuperation time for you mentally, emotionally, well-being, which we know more about now, and so much more in tune to that now. But you were also fighting the fight for equity and advancement, whether it was for a field or for scholarships or for equipment or budgets, whatever that might have been. How did you choose what to fight for, and how did you learn how to, and I use the word fight because everybody's familiar with it, but it has that negative connotation. We've talked about that where you take your lumps, but how did you choose? Because we still have teams that line their own field. We still have teams that are picking up their own rocks. We still have teams without bathrooms. And these are, Division I teams, Division III teams, junior college teams, doesn't matter. It runs the gamut. But what advice would you give? How did you learn how to do that in a time where it was not well received? Many would say it's still not today. But Gerry, you want to start us off on that one?
I think using the power of Title IX, we were taught to be so respectful of people, and a couple of times I look back now and I wish I'd have done things different. I wish I would have used the power. But I was taught to be respectful of my elders and of the people, ahead of me. And so as young coaches, you just didn't know how much authority you had or how much to push. A quick example is the athletic director I was telling you about that didn't want anything to do with women's sports. We were, I believe it was around mid 80s. We were ranked in the top 10, would have been seeded fourth at the national tournament. We were in the strongest district and by district in the country in NAIA that year. We won our district. President was in attendance. Athletic director sure wasn't. And we even got to play that on the Softball Hall of Fame stadium field. But we went to the by district, played Washburn. They also were in the top 10 nationally ranked. We had a 2 out of 3 series, split the series, and then they beat us, I think, by a run or two. So, but there was one at-large bid extended every year, and I knew we were going to get the at-large bid because we were the strongest by district. Sure enough, we got extended the at-large bid, and our athletic director called me in and said, "Y'all aren't going to the national tournament." And I said, "What?" And he said, "It's my philosophy. If you don't win, you don't go." And so he denied us going to the national tournament. I went in to the assistant athletic director, who was supposed to be the women's athletic director, and I said, "Can I go over his head to the president?" I was trying to do the right protocol. And he looked at me and he said, "Gerry," he said, "I'm afraid if you do, then you might get to go to nationals, but your budgets may suffer or something will happen where next year, And so without saying he will retaliate, that's essentially what he was telling me. If I had it to do over, I would have gone to the president and taken my chances now in this day and time. But like I said, I was still fairly young, didn't want to get fired, didn't want to, cause problems. So I sat there and we didn't go to nationals. Would have been seeded fourth at the national tournament. I think, and I even had an All-American pitcher that we might have even had a chance to win it. But those are the kinds of things that, I guess I was taught personally by my parents, to be respectful of others. So, and the mentors around me didn't encourage me to go ahead and go over his head. What happened though is the NAIA got so angry that we did not accept the at-large bid that they called our president, and the very next year there was a rule in NAIA that if you were extended the at-large bid, you had to accept it. From then on, it was something you had to do. And our athletic director retired at the end of that year, and I'm pretty sure the president told him he had to retire. that didn't help us any. But I guess in answer to your question with that example, I would just say you can still be respectful, but fight for what's right. And I think, I would tell somebody in a position to think about the pros and cons of things, and then think about a strategy to fight for what you think is right, but to do it in the right way and to do it the respectful way.
Even when I was called to the dean's office a couple of times, there was no ranting or raving. There was like going around the back door. Oh, yes, sir. I thought that we could do that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All this kind of stuff. But how about this? Can we do, there was a lot of negotiation. There was no anger, a lot of negotiation, and a lot of going around the back door. And even all the way through my career, we got less for softball than obviously baseball did. And equipment wise, even less than basketball, which the equipment for softball is way more than basketball. But you just kind of go around the back door. And to me, educating the kids, not only in the classroom, but on the field, teaching them every little aspect of the game was the most important thing to my coaching, just teaching them. And as long as we could do that, and as long as we could use the foyer when the men's basketball team was still practicing, we got another hour or so in the foyer before we had to go back into the gym because it was obviously too cold outside. Anytime it was not snowing and it was not bitterly cold, yeah, we'd go outside and hit flies in the wind and everything else. So there's a lot of things that you can do if like you get cut for gym space, because we only had 2 hours. So we had to find alternative areas to go to get at least 3 hours in. But I think you're right. If you go in and you start yelling and screaming, you're not going to get anywhere, I don't think.
But I think we as women don't push ourselves as much as we should. If I've heard Patty Gasso talk about, when she earlier years just was a little bit intimidated to walk into the athletic director's office and ask for a raise. You win a national championship. Do you have to ask for a raise, or wouldn't it be nice if the athletic directors just offered you a raise? But it seems like guys have no fear or discretion about doing that. If they think they deserve a raise, they can go in and ask without fear of any kind of retribution. I think we hang back a little bit too much, and maybe we just need to be a little more aggressive in those kinds of things. And like I said, sometimes, we'll even get told if you'd have just asked, but you didn't ever ask. So I just think I would tell young coaches. We have a new women's basketball coach on our campus, and she and I had dinner last night, and she wanted some mentoring, and that's the kind of thing I told her. I said, just go in when you find something that you don't have or you need, just go in and ask for it, and don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't go in, mad, but go in and sit down in a calm, nice voice and say, how can we resolve this? Because I need such and such, and I don't have the money. What do you suggest? How can you help me? Put it on their shoulders.
Wouldn't it be nice to know if it was a woman as an athletic director to the men's teams? What would happen with the guys? Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah.
Well, and you were both in various athletic departments, but for so long they were separate. You had the women's athletic department, the men's athletic department, and different athletic directors. And I hear so many people talk about how it was a little bit better for them in some capacities. And then you hear others that say yes, but the segment would always lend itself to the men's sports having so much more. And we've seen that a little bit in different ways with even basketball, a year and some months ago of the video that broke the internet with the weight room and just getting the people in the room, right? So that the basketball on the men's side is talking to basketball on the women's side and what a championship should look like. And, Gerry, you have spent a lot of time in Oklahoma City at the championship, and Celeste, you've been around a lot of championships, but what do you think the expectation should be when it comes to the championship experience and all of these discrepancies that we've seen in the last few years, and how difficult it seems to find change? Division II right now working so hard to get an extra day off at the World Series that they don't have. The baseball schedule is built for 2 more days. What do you think that solution is, and coaches just from the championship front, if nothing else? Celeste, you want to go first on this one?
Well, I think Division II and some of the other ones, they need to go to the national office. And again, as a unified group, say, this mentally is not good for the kids. Those games at the College World Series playing at, late into the night, that's crazy. We did that at the NJCAA because of rain, and it was crazy. We finished the game at 2:30 and got up and played a game at 4:30 in the morning. And that wasn't fun for any of us. So I think things like that comes down to injuries and mental fatigue and everything else. They have a right to go as a conference, as a group, and go to the NCAA and say, we need to fix this.
I don't know how many of the coaches go to convention each year.
Yeah.
I would wish that all the coaches, especially those who annually make it to the national tournament, would go to convention, and as a group, just like Celeste had said a few minutes ago, as a group, confront the NCAA for changes. Last year at the Division I championship, Patty Gasso and I think Tim Walton and several of the coaches that were here at the national tournament, they're the ones who spoke out very loudly about that very thing of that's ridiculous to have a national championship play in the middle of the night. And so they were very verbal about that. And the good thing for them is that publicly went national, so people were kind of up in the arms and supporting them nationally. The same thing about the replay. It took a couple of bad calls, for that issue to come up. And as a group, that group of coaches got it changed. And it right not too long after the World Series, both of those things that they were so vocal about came into being. And that shows you what power the coaches have if they would just go confront the NCAA and to try to change things. So I would say, again, the coaches are the ones that have probably the loudest voice. And if they don't express it, then nothing's going to change. So I would really encourage them to use their voice and use their power.
Yes, and the student athletes. I think that's what we saw with Oregon, and that whole thing with the weight room. The voice of the student athlete, has gotten so much play. The student athlete welfare, and that was a huge part of the Women's College World Series push, and the NFCA was instrumental in that as well, and just gathering the feedback and holding the calls and coming up with alternatives. And there are so many things that we need to do. How does it make you feel when you've been on the front lines of this for so long? You from the pitching machine in your trunk, and now still you're looking at it thinking, okay, well, we're still missing $10 million from a baseball to a softball championship, buy-in, and we're still missing, women's sports at the number of scholarships they have compared to men's sports just across the board. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it disappointment? When you think about what we're still trying to get to 50 years later, what's the first thing that comes into your mind? Gerry, you want to go first?
Frustrated. I like I said, I love to have been a part of the evolution from where I was as a young kid to now. It's been wonderful to see. To walk up at our stadium and see what these girls get to play on, but I also, Cody gives me the opportunity to tell them, so they're appreciative of what they have. But I'm still frustrated that I think there should be more women coaches. And even though there are some great guys, don't get me wrong, that are coaching, and because they really wanted to coach women, it wasn't that they were just thrown into a job. But uh, I was just invited to be on the search committee for the new women's basketball coach. That's it was kind of an honor because I've been retired 16 years, and even though I've done some things up at campus, it kind of floored me that they called and asked me if I'd be on the search committee. But the neat thing about being able to do that is that right away when we met the first time, I said, "Are we going to try to look at hiring a female coach?" So I got a chance to use my voice and expressing the desire to hire a female because the coach that had been there was a guy, and he was one of my former students. He was successful and he retired, but I still was pushing for a female coach, and sure enough, the committee, kind of agreed with that, and we hired a female. How did the young ladies get an opportunity, if they're not given the opportunity? So I still think that's a place of inequality. I think salaries, you have to be, a five-time national champion to get $1 million salary. And certainly Division II coaches aren't anywhere close to that. Division III coaches, NAIA coaches, they're not anywhere close to that. So, and I wouldn't expect them to be, but I would expect to be paid equally to the baseball coach. And I don't know that that's happening. So there's still areas that I think are very frustrating that we have not come as far as we should come.
Yeah, I agree. It's frustrating. It's maddening. You look at Division I softball and you look at the top Division I softball. Yeah, the stadiums are great. The uniforms are great. Everything is really good. I'm assuming their salaries are as good as Patty's, maybe not as, but they're good salaries, But then you look at everybody else, and I just don't think that has gone along with it. It's all the TV, teams that are going to be on TV, and it's the same ones over and over again. And the little guy doesn't have a chance to get on there. The other thing is, to me, the Olympics, that was a gift and a curse, to have softball in the Olympics. It was a gift because thank goodness it's about time. It was a curse because everything boomed, which you would say, wow, that's a gift too. Yeah, okay, that's a gift for the kids. They have more opportunities, but who are the coaches? The coaches, for the most part, are not physical education people, right, Gerry?
Yep.
They're not physical education people. They're guys out of the stands. If, like when we have the showcases, everybody's like, wow, I bet you really love going and watching the games and everything. I said, Vicki and I don't watch a game. There's no strategy and there's no fundamentals. So what are the kids learning? And they all think they can play Division I, except they really don't know what it takes to play Division I. And then they're disappointed when they don't go Division I, when they could go to a very good smaller school, NJCAA school, and play for a national championship. My kids would have loved to have won a national championship instead of taking second 3 times. But that was the coach's fault each time. Anyway, that part of it, there's so many guys coaching now that have not been brought up on how to coach the game or how to coach women. Am I wrong, Gerry?
No, you're right. And what I found is one of their biggest weaknesses is pitching. They might have played baseball.
Yeah.
So they know a little bit about the transition of the game, but they've got to go find a pitching coach because they don't know a thing about pitching.
And everybody wants to jack the ball over the fence.
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
watch TV and they see everybody jacking the ball over the fence. And it's like, you don't know what it takes to be able to jack that ball over the fence. So you got these little kids trying to do that instead of actually trying to win the game with, you know, bunt, slap, run, base hit. You know, they just want them to jack the ball. And that's not helping the kid.
Yeah.
That's not education.
I think so much of it too. And when we think about the start of coaches, and I know that for me, having worked for people like Joanne Graff and Dee Abrahamson and some others, just have Margot Yonker, I just have a different perspective, and I'm so appreciative that I've been given that gift of that perspective. And but it's that pedagogy piece, right? Celeste and Gerry, I think you're thinking of the learning how to coach, how to teach,
Exactly.
and not understanding, you know, some of those things. And I've got a 5-year-old playing t-ball, right? And they're so funny, and you go to practice, and you know, you watch some things, and the parents that want to help, but they don't know how to help. And Celeste, we've had so many conversations, and we're working on it, but you know, they don't know where to start. And so they start by emulating, right? And it's like, well, Kat Osterman does this. Okay, but you know, she's kind of she's kind of a gift, you know. I mean, she's even Lisa Fernandez. I would never teach pitching the way I pitched, and you know, some of those things, but understanding the biomechanics and so many things, and that is a change.
Huge.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
And
change.
all you have to do, like at the showcases, all we have to do is watch them warm up. And I'm telling you, you got 20 kids warming up and not one of them follow through. And what does that do to your arm? That wrecks your arm. You know, they're not following through, the ball's dying, the ball doesn't get there, and then they get yelled at by the coaches because they can't get the ball over there, when they simply have to pick up their throwing hand side and follow through. But see, those are things that the coaches don't know.
Some of the good things around here is a lot of the coaches do the camps, and they actually bring younger girls into their camps, you know, and they are teaching fundamentals and skills and things like that. And they seem to do a pretty good job from what I've watched, at least around here. So that's all I can speak to, because you
But
know,
are
being
there,
retired, I don't. You know, I've only gotten to go back to a convention a couple of times to hear some of these things that are going on. And yes, I do go up and watch all the UCO softball games, but beyond that, and then I go to the World Series. Beyond that, you know, occasionally I go up to OSU and occasionally to OU to watch games, but most of the time I'm kind of out of it. So, you know, but I hear the things that make me frustrated, you know, about how things haven't changed, and that still is the biggest word I would use, would be frustrating.
yes, I agree.
I mean, we're 50 years. I know, you know, I was barely out of college when they passed Title IX in 1972. It was 1980. If you go ask most colleges across the country, when did you all start sports? They'll say, oh, 1980, you know, because all of us that played sports, Celeste, you and I, that played in college, we played in college. People just didn't know about it. There wasn't any publicity, and we just kind of played in state, traveled, and so on and so forth. I loved my 4 years of college. I wouldn't change it for anything. It made me a better teacher because I could teach all those things I played, you know, had the experience of doing. But you know, like I said, it's just I don't know, it's just not gone as far as I thought it would, because it took 8 years for them to even start implementing Title IX. And again, it was because of lawsuits that scare. I think if the lawsuits hadn't happened, the principals and the athletic directors would still be dragging their feet. We wouldn't be anywhere close to where we are right now.
And
So
now
those
some
lawsuits,
schools,
you know, helped tremendously. And then when they kind of settled down, because people started actually doing something about Title IX, you know, then people backed off. There was a Title IX investigation at our school. I don't know who filed it, the complaint, but I sure wish I did, because I would love to go give them a big hug because it did make some difference. I got full funding of scholarships that year. We were, I think, Division II by then. So we got our full funding and scholarships. I think I had 6 full rides. I got an office by myself because the tennis coach and I had been officing together, the women's tennis coach, but all the men had their own offices. I was the only female coach, though, by the way, but they did give me my own office. It was right by the athletic director, probably so that they could make sure that I didn't do anything I shouldn't do. But anyway, so we made some progress, but it took a Title IX complaint to even push us a little further forward. It's just, it's just not come near 50 years. But, you could get into racial issues the same way. I mean, look how far that's not coming. Just so many issues.
That for sure.
We just drag our feet.
I know at least nobody had an office by themselves at Merrimack. We all had little cubicles.
Mm-hmm.
There were 3 of us and 2 other teachers, and they didn't coach anymore. And then the 2 guys had their little office with their cubicles. So that was equal.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget my first athletic director. When I'd come back from the dean's office, he'd go, okay, we're going to work on this. But he said, you know what, between you and me, I'd rather have to hold you down than kick you to get going. And I'm like, okay, I get the picture. So.
Yeah.
So for you all, and you start thinking about the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what do you think the biggest way to affect change? What do you think the responsibility of industry leaders, whether it's coaches, administrators, professional organizations, what do you think that looks like? What would you love to see? No limits, nothing holding you back. What would you like to see happen over the next several years? Celeste, do you want to go first?
Oh boy, that's a tough one because, the schools are handicapped with budgets, and yes, the budgets may not be equal, but good luck trying to make them equal. If you get businesses involved, are they going to go with the guys or are they going to go with the girls? More than likely they're going to go with the guys. So, and if they go with the girls, it's going to be the top Division I. I don't see them unless you have a benefactor that all of a sudden has kids who played softball. But boy, who's going to seek all of that out? I don't know. Gerry, you got any ideas?
Boy, my thoughts right now are a little more toward the negative, mostly because of the portal and the name, image, and likeness. I'm so glad that I'm not coaching right now and have to deal with that. So I don't know that I have any real advice about the portal. I don't know that I have any real advice about the NIL, because I'm certainly not having to deal with it. But to me, I can't, I even just read in our daily paper here in Oklahoma this morning where, there are so many business people that are banding together to form like a group where they can have this big pile of money so that they can pay the football people and the basketball guys and girls. And so now they're going to start getting money. Well, that's definitely going to influence where a kid goes to school. It's just going to be a mess. So I really don't have a whole lot of advice right now because I would just be lost in all that, seriously.
I'm not sure who thought the portal was a good idea or the NIL. I'm not sure who thought that.
Well, and
I think everybody's lost in that right now.
I mean,
it's still, like you said, Celeste, and especially because of the pandemic, it's affected all university budget, not just athletics, obviously, but because enrollment has gone down and people, didn't it's a mess, but it's affected budgets. So I would hate to be probably the financial officer of a university right now, trying to figure out how to, divvy up budgets and things like that. Um, but it would just be tough, all the way around. I admire just watching our current coach, just watching how he's navigated the COVID 2 or 3 years, of kids not knowing when they're going to test positive or whether they're not going to be able to play, or 2 or 3 others aren't going to be able to play, or you have to sit out, and how long do you sit? I mean, that's just been tremendous heavy load to sift through the last 2 or 3 years. So they've done as good a job as they can. We didn't have to go through anything like that. And now the budgets, I just think it's going to be tough going ahead. So kids, have parents that are struggling because of COVID and financially, and so they need more money to go to school. Colleges, some of them are increasing tuition to cover the problems, and then now that cuts some kids out, or they're seeking ways to get financial aid. I just think it's going to be a big mess. Again, I people must be just faced with so many different things. We talked to Celeste about the struggles we went through, and what the coaches are going through now are struggling in a lot of different areas that we really didn't have to do. Yep. So, I don't know too much about how to help them.
Yeah, you're right. When back in the day when nobody had scholarships, it was a lot easier sometimes than having to decide on everything that's going on today.
Yeah, definitely different struggles, and just understanding even generations, in the middle, right? Like I didn't grow up with social media. I didn't have to worry when I was in junior high about what somebody was posting on the internet about me. I mean, just things that you're not responsible enough to deal with as an individual. And then it's, exacerbated by social media and phones, and so many of the pieces of the mental health crisis go back to 2007. And, the big thing in 2007 was the iPhone, right? The iPhone was invented and launched, and it's just the access, and there's a lot of things. And, the flip side, I am so thankful that sport can be a reprieve for so many of these young people who are in mental health crises, because it's not just athletes. I mean, it is everyone. And the numbers are horrendous. Whether you're, have the gift of athleticism, and then you think about the resources, right? The resources universities have for their athletes compared for their normal student body. And you're going, man, even with all of that, you're still going to have student athletes that don't get the help they need. And you're going to have even more students that don't get the help they need. And even more, we talked about the just disadvantages of whether it's socioeconomically driven or it's racially driven, or they're just individuals that don't have the same access to help, whatever it is, financial aid, mental health, whatever it is. And, definitely hope that's something that can change in the next 50 years as well, as just driving opportunity along with supports. So it's not just here's your pile of name, image, likeness money, but here's how we can help you become a contributing member of society. Here's how you can grow, the good in the world. Here's how you can do so many other things. And I promise you we get on a tangent, Gerry. I didn't know what it would be about, but I promise you we would do something. Honestly though, ladies, I think it's so important for coaches to hear the voice and understand that, there's some responsibility. I don't know, my word, not yours, I guess right now, but some responsibility involved to continue making sure that that quest for gender equity and isn't lost because you're just told to be happy with what you have. I would never speak for her, but if I'm Coach Gasso, I'm mad already. My new stadium's not done and it's too small. I mean, they haven't even broken ground on it yet, and it's too small. Yep. So, and there's some real things. It's crazy.
Yeah, their stadium is already going to be too small because, they have such a following right now. And if it continues, it's unbelievable. They're going to have to, I don't know, they're going to have to build a stadium like the Hall of Fame.
What a great problem to have.
The Lowe's company, I will say, was very generous, to step up and say they would do that. But I did send a message, and I said that I hope that in the naming of the field, they would not forget Marita Hines for all that she did for softball and the College World Series, and that also, obviously, with the elephant in the room of 5 national championships, there ought to be something that's named after Patty Gasso. So, and the person that sent me back a message said, I will assure you that we will do something. Can't tell you what, but we will do something. So, yeah, I think already the stadium's going to be too small.
Oh, wow.
Well, and that happened with Clemson, right? They built the new stadium and they've already added on to it once. And I think they have some temporary expansion twice. And I mean, it's just a testament to the growth of the sport, how amazing it is, how many people love it. And, but then, look, the total other side, Oklahoma State, they can get 750 people can watch. What a great team. What a tremendous program. I still need to get to a game there. They look like they have so much fun. And you can't get people there. And then right across the way is a baseball stadium that is rarely full, And
brand new and an unreal facility. There will be a softball stadium there in the works. They have a new athletic director that I think will get on top of that a little faster now. They have added some platforms in the outfield so that more and more people can watch from out there. So they're adding a little bit as they go until I guess they get the funding for the new softball stadium up there. But I know that'll come also.
And my question is, when do we get the stadiums for D2, D3, and NJCAA? Will that ever happen?
Mm-hmm. There are programs that,
I mean,
go ahead, Gerry.
I started to say, I'm finding out that little by little there are the stadiums in Division II. I asked that in our conference the other day. I wanted to know because I wasn't sure. The stadium we have now is really good to host regionals and super regionals. It wasn't a few years ago when we won, even the year we won the national championship. Our field wasn't the dimensions it should have been, and so our regional and super regional were held at a high school here in Edmond. But then the new stadium got built, and it's the dimensions, and it's great. So the other day I was asking the current coach, what other MIAA, that's our conference, schools have a facility like this? And he said there's a few. So even I think Washburn, he said, was identical to what ours is. So there are a few starting, Celeste. It's going to take a president and an athletic director to put that as a priority. And if it's not done, it's going to take the coaches to push for it. And that's where I think they've got to not be timid. They've got to go in and say, our softball facility is nowhere close to the baseball, and what can we do about it? They just got to keep going in and use their voice.
It's one thing Jackie Joseph and Hutch, they were on with Cindy Bristow, and it was a riot, but they started talking about just this idea that they would just take whatever they do for baseball and just shrink, scale it down to fit within 60-foot base paths and call it good for softball. And it's just that method just doesn't work. And, some of these attendance issues that we see, Alabama's one of the bigger stadiums in the country, and they can't fit. You can't watch a game there. And I hear you, Celeste, there are some Division II, Division III teams that are so good, so much fun to watch, huge community support, NJCAA schools too. And just being able to make that investment, because we know athletics isn't a moneymaker in the traditional sense. the revenue stream isn't in the traditional sense, but it's the driving force, especially Celeste at those schools, for enrollment. How many times were you told you help the enrollment, and it's there's a piece of that. Kids have to want to drive enrollment and feel that community. So definitely a good point. Well, ladies, before I take, go ahead, Gerry, go ahead.
It reminded me of a quick funny story when the president who had the daughter that played softball, when he came in to our school and he said, we're going to build you a new softball field. He had told me that, but then he went to the vice president of financial affairs and she said, well, why do we have to build them a new field? Why can't they just play on the baseball field?
Oh. Okay. Ouch.
So that was kind of hilarious.
Yeah, that's one of those, do you want to take that one or should I?
Geez.
Could I take you over to the baseball field and tell you all the differences and show you all the differences? It was just hilarious.
Yeah. Education.
Okay.
Yes. Well, before I take all of your afternoon, ladies, which I would do if you'd let me, but is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything you've thought of as we've been talking of, I really want to share this, or I really want to help coaches understand this, or fans or student athletes in their quest, or anything else you want to add?
Well, I'm big on teaching. So teach every little aspect of the game.
I'm also big on role modeling, because
yes.
I would like for the coaches to realize just how influential they are to their athletes, and what they say and what they do matters. And I can, even now, in most cases, I can tell by watching a female in business or whatever, I can tell whether they played sports or not by the way they handle themselves, the way they handle ups and downs and things like that. So I just hope that coaches realize the tremendous influence they have every day of a practice or in a game or in front of parents, with the recruiting, with the whole business of remaining classy and high standards, that I hope all of us in the early years modeled and hope to model to continue today.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much. For those of you listening, if you want to connect with these coaches or hear more, learn more, I know they would be happy to chat with you. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'll volunteer them for them. But then also they are mainstays at our convention programming and a lot of our educational initiatives. So stay involved with us. Two tremendous Hall of Fame members. This whole time, Gerry's been talking about the field. She hasn't mentioned once that it's got her name on it, but it does. A very, very cool, very rare accomplishment. So Gerry, you'll get that in there. But truly, thank you so much for everything, your insight, your candor. Just really love having you as part of the NFCA, and thank you for all you've done for the sport and continue to do for the sport. We're very blessed to have you as a part of our organization.
Thank you.